very good evening and welcome to Capital Connection, where we join the dots to give you the big picture for business in Africa. I'm Arnold Segawa. On the agenda, we have an exclusive and in-depth interview with Nigeria's Minister of State and Petroleum Resources, Emmanuel Kachikwu, where he drills down on the plans for the continent's biggest oil producer, among other pertinent issues facing the nation. And globally, there is a growing movement for wealthy elites to pay higher individual tax rates. We will interrogate the view from the corporate perspective that believes in the age of extreme income disparity, the rich should continue to be spared high tax rates. But first, Malta pioneered legislation in blockchain and cryptocurrencies, providing one of the broad legal and regulatory frameworks supporting the growth of this new sector. In all of this, it managed to attract a host of blockchain companies to the Mediterranean island state. Joining me from Cape Town is Jean Paul Fabri, where he is attending this year's Blockchain Africa conference. He is a blockchain specialist, economist, and director at the Malta-based ARQ Group. JP, welcome and many thanks for making time to speak to us. If you were explaining blockchain to someone who can hardly type on a keyboard, how would you break it down for them?
Well, I would say that blockchain is a transformative technology that will literally change a number of sectors that we are currently dealing with. It is like imagining a new road on the internet, right? And then we'll start seeing a number of cars utilizing this road or this technology for a number of different purposes.
JP, of course, the follow-up question there from our pedestrian might be, if this is as big as it is, why has adoption not been as exponential as, let's say, the fax machine or the telephone?
Sure. So like any other transformative technology, it takes time for a technology to become truly adopted by the masses. I mean, if we see internet, there was a whole transition as well. From people started to send files, emails, and then e-commerce. So the same with blockchain, this will take a bit of time. There is one key issue which I believe is impacting this, which is that the focus has been very much oriented or focused on cryptocurrencies, whereas the focus should be on the underlying technology. And then we will start seeing adoption by particular sectors, which will start making users, so the normal users in the street, appreciate the value that blockchain will bring in their daily lives.
Right. JP, you've actually touched a very interesting issue, which is people, when you mention blockchain, many people, I would say 8 out of 10, misinterpret blockchain for cryptocurrencies, which is just a payment platform. And ultimately, this has been misunderstood for being an investment, you know, the likes of Bitcoin. Going forward, is it essential to separate the two so that many of the consumers out there do know that blockchain is one thing that is an enabler to maybe payment systems like Bitcoin?
Yeah. In fact, that's why I brought the example of the road. So the road is a blockchain, and a particular type of car or different types of cars are cryptocurrencies that sit on that road. So the focus over here needs to be squarely on the technology. It is a technology that will provide better access to public services. It is a technology that will provide improvements in efficiency and cost savings for businesses in supply chain management, trade finance, banking relationships. So the worrying thing is that this whole debate on blockchain has been hijacked by cryptocurrencies. This is expected because ultimately people always focus where the money is. So the more you had volatility in Bitcoin with prices going up, rallying prices, and then the crash, the focus will always turn to the monetary aspects. But in reality, there is much more to blockchain than cryptocurrencies.
Right. JP, one debate that has been put forward by many economists is the fact that blockchain might relegate central banks and their role on the front of monetary policy to the back and just empower ordinary citizens like you or me with the emergence of blockchain? Do you get the sense that this is one worry that central banks across the globe are actually seeing right now with blockchain?
Well, I think it's not a question of being black or white. It's a question of seeing what the different shades are. Central banks will be key determinants, and we're seeing that the IMF is also pushing forward the agenda of having central banks utilizing blockchain technology for the issuance of digital currency. Now, this will be a game changer also in the adoption of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but it will also manage to solve some of the key issues of vulnerable countries, especially with volatile currencies. So I think the emergence of a digital currency which is backed by a central bank will be a very important tipping point where we'll see adoption. But I do not agree that it will be a question of central banks being relegated to the back. It's more central banks embracing this technology and seeing how a central bank can utilize an enabling technology such as blockchain to the benefit of all, especially with a proper and effective monetary policy surrounding such a currency.
Now, the world's 26 richest people own as much as the bottom half of humanity. This is according to the non-government organization Oxfam International, a stat that has added to the demands for the higher tax rates on the rich. Recently, I got a chance to speak to Professor Jannie Roussouw, the head of South Africa's University of the Witwatersrand School of Economics and Business Science. This, as well as Leon Louw, who is the executive director of the libertarian-leaning think tank, that's the Free Market Foundation. I first asked Professor Roussouw what considerations were at play in determining tax rates.
Yes, indeed, people react to tax changes. For instance, in the case of South Africa, when the maximum marginal tax rate was increased from 41% to 45%, we saw immigration from South Africa to Mauritius by wealthy people, because Mauritius is indeed a tax haven. So wealthy people can seek out tax havens and can move their tax affairs to such tax havens.
Leon, let me bring you in here. It's almost impossible or even irrelevant for us to have this chat about taxes without talking about the elephant in the room, which is once you take your taxes higher, everyone will just run to tax havens. Are the two mutually inclusive? Can you actually arrest one without addressing the havens to start with here?
You can ameliorate it. In other words, if you have a very high growth, very wealthy economy, even if you have nominally higher tax rates than somebody in a poor, low growth, stagnating economy, you will certainly attract higher income people. And it's important to understand who they are. People with higher incomes normally are people who are more productive, whose time and services are worth more. And as a country, you want to attract the most valuable managers in the world. And the way to do that is their after-tax income is what matters, has to be competitive with the rest of the world. So what you want to do is you want to say, come here, we are a prosperous economy, and in this country you will get more, you will get to keep more of your money than anywhere else, and you'll get to earn more than anywhere else. That's the way to succeed and prosper and to get the world's best managers, the world's best people. And that's what you want, whether you're a laborer or a consumer or a politician or whatever. You want the world's best managers.
Ultimately, Professor, you would think politicians actually sit on the fence here, because at home you're actually under so much pressure to increase taxes for the 1%ers. But on the other hand, if you do increase these taxes, it will bring down the FDI coming into a country and capital inflows. How do you draw the balance here?
Well, your politicians are even more conflicted than this, Arnold, in as much as they are part of your 1% income earners. So if you increase taxes for your top 1% income earners, you also increase their tax rates. We must be very careful in South Africa that we make sure going forward that politicians pay the same taxes as other South Africans. Politicians can be very clever and design tax schemes and tax arrangements that will exclude themselves from their own tax decisions. And South Africa must really watch this spot.
I want to Leon, let's talk about the US example. I like that the Prof has brought in the politicians, because the president of the US, President Donald Trump, up to now, 2 years in, well, 3 years counting, he's yet to release his tax returns. Now, it's one thing to talk about what the Prof is saying. The politicians also have to be part of the problem here and address it. But if they're not ready to come to the party and actually declare their tax returns, where do you start?
Well, I think it's firstly declaring tax returns is one thing, but how much they earn and what they disclose and what they don't disclose is a perhaps more important thing than publishing a tax return. And so we have to start, I think, by saying, as the Prof says, look at the politicians critically. The politicians are amongst the wealthiest people in the country. By the way, the other wealthiest people in the country are sports heroes, entertainers. They never get considered to be part of the 1%. In America, for example, the top Hollywood income earners earn more than the equivalent proportion of the top CEOs. In other words, the heads of companies, which everyone talks about, are actually lower income earners than entertainers who actually go and demonstrate against the 1%ers in the streets of New York, which is really bizarre and perverse. So what we need to do is say, it doesn't really matter what the top income earners are. And I want to say that true of the entertainers as well, or the sports heroes, Tiger Woods or whoever. Or Oprah Winfrey, it doesn't really, or the CEOs of companies, or for that matter, Donald Trump. The proportion of money they get, because there are so few of them, is a tiny, trivial percentage of the total expenditure of a company. So the money being paid to workers, being paid for capital, being paid for savings, being paid for maintenance, being paid for marketing and distribution, far exceeds. So if you, for example, have a CEO who comes to a company and saves the company $10 billion, paying that person $1 billion is a bargain. If you have a CEO who's losing $10 billion, paying them $1 billion to go is a bargain. So what we must say is we want the CEOs who are worth the most to the company, and there's only one place to make that decision, which is the company. The tax authorities should not be discouraging the company or the country from having the world's best managers, or for that matter, the best sports stars or best entertainers or whatever. You want to attract to your country the best. And for that, you must not tax the people who are the best. You must be a bit more modest about how you tax them.
And that's where we will have to leave it. Now, coming up after the break, CNBC Africa's exclusive interview with Nigeria's State and Petroleum Resources Minister Emmanuel Kachikwu. Up next. Welcome back to Capital Connection. Now, earlier my colleague Chris Bishop, the head of programming for CNBC Africa, sat down with Nigeria's State and Petroleum Resources Minister Emmanuel Kachikwu in an exclusive interview. He first asked him for his reaction to the country's recent election, which saw the incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari voted in for a second term in office.
Well, happy that it's peaceful, happy that it's over. It's, well, not quite over. We still have one more election, which is the governorship. But certainly, I think every Nigerian is happy that the main one, which is the presidential, has come and gone. A few controversies here and there, but largely peaceful. We're excited about the fact that the president will be allowed another 4 years to finish up the work that he started. I think generally, when you have 4 year stints, just like I've had 4 year stints, it's most times not enough for you to complete all the work that you have. So I think this is good for the president. It's good for continuity, and so we're hoping that some of the work that was done in the first term will continue to the second term and a lot more.
And last time around, it took him 6 months to come up with his new cabinet. You were saying earlier it might be a lot faster this time. It should be. For one, he already has some ministers. I wouldn't imagine that all the ministers will be changed. Some will be retained.
And so to that extent, it's an easier pick. Secondly, the fact this election is thrown out some real political leaders in various geographical zones. So even if we're trying to balance some of those interests, it should be easy. And given the fact that there's a continuum of work that is already ongoing, work is not going to stop any day. I mean, the current Federal Executive Council obviously will be statutorily dissolved just before he swears into office. He's sworn into office for the second time, which is probably about May 27, 28, maybe 29. But work is going to continue right through. So therefore, I would imagine that there are people who, both from the administrative cadre, both from the pool of the Villa staff, and some ministers who will naturally transit out fairly quickly. So it should be easy. Well, I never know what, I've never run for president, so I never know how much challenge is involved in appointments. But I would imagine that the pressures on him, as much as they will still be there, will not be as bad as when he was first coming into a civilian government for the first time.
Now, I'm going to talk about your ministry in a second, but just first, what do you think is the biggest challenges and the greatest problems you think the new government has to sort out in Nigeria?
First is we're going to keep working on the economy. The economy isn't where we want it to be. We'd like to see, in the last quarter numbers were probably the best that we've had in quite a while, so that's helpful. So it means that the economy is trending in the right direction, obviously, but certainly not buoyant enough for the size of Nigerian economy, so we need to obviously focus on that heavily. Infrastructure is key. This government is probably putting much more than most other governments in terms of building infrastructure as a percentage of our national budget, which is fantastic. But we need to do even more because there have been so many years of neglect. The very unsettled disquiet in a lot of areas, whether it's Boko Haram in the north, whether it's militants in the south, whether it is herdsmen issues. There are lots of issues of safety and security that we need. He needs to go on headlong on, and continue in the path, but with a lot more, obviously, aggressiveness to bring that to completion. Done quite a lot. If you mind, when he came into position, Boko Haram was occupying probably about 14 or 18 local governments in the country. They occupy none now, but like every guerrilla warfare type approach, these individuals come in and strike. But for the citizenry, the key thing is people are getting killed. It's not a matter of how they come, whether they come by night or by day or by force. So a lot more work obviously needs to be done. So obviously continue to fund the military sufficiently to carry out that work is also essential. So security will be key, economy will be key, development and infrastructure will be key. So quite some areas of challenge.
Well, now to your world of oil and gas. I understand that Nigeria's had some very strong approaches from the Middle East for you to cut your production. How much are you considering that, and what kind of a cut in production would you consider?
I think the news is being misplaced. There isn't a pressure on us to cut our production. There was already an agreement in OPEC in December to cut production. And allocations were given to every country that is a member of OPEC and signed on to by all OPEC members. So they were not coming to say do more. They were coming to say, when are you going to be sure that you've complied fully on a 100% basis? And we've given them the guarantee that we will. I think the plan was always, as Minister of State, I had issued directives to Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation on behalf of His Excellency the President for full compliance, which the President also confirmed when the delegation came.
So by how much and by when?
I don't have the exact figures, but my recollection was that there was something like less than a 2% cut that was generally agreed. I need to check those numbers. And for Nigeria, I think it was more in the region of over 20 or 30,000 barrels a day. That was the sort of numbers that was allocated to Nigeria at the time. Every country has different shares of allocation depending on your size and volume. So we're going to comply with that. Now with more fields coming on, hopefully, potentially coming on stream, the Gina has just come on stream, not yet in full capacity, still less than 100,000, but ultimately at full capacity in the next couple of months will probably be closer to 150, 200,000 barrels. There'll be more pressure in terms of how do you deal with this, because that's infusing back into the market that you're supposed to be taken out of. So those are things that we'll need to sit down and work. But I think that it gives us also a very unique opportunity to begin to look at the cost of production. And certainly if I were to be caught as a minister, I'll be looking to say, if your cost is extremely high and my margins are very little, I'll go to those where my margins are highest for purposes of national income. So there will be all kinds of pressures on oil companies to again look at, because historically Nigerian cost of production are quite frankly too high, in my view. We've managed to bring that down a little, but it's still not where I'd love it to be. And
what can you do about that as government?
Yes.
What can you do about it as government?
What you could do about that is basically if it's a JV field, you can take a decision as NNPC JV that this is too high, and you'd rather put your investment money, cash call money, where it's going to yield you a lot more. That's one. Two, even if it's a PSC, the volume of cost you are ready to allocate to deal with costs, you can quite frankly begin to zero down on that. Especially if you can benchmark it on other PSC producers who are showing better efficiency in those areas.
And what kind of reduction in costs are you looking for?
We're averaging about $23 a barrel now. I'd like that to be in the range of 15 and less, which is quite frankly, from a benchmark basis, Saudi Arabia is probably between 8 and 9. We may not be as efficient as they for obvious reasons, issues of security, issues of cost, but we ought to be quite frankly 15 below. And one or two companies have been able to achieve that.
And what about the issue of refineries? Now, as you know, Nigerian billionaire Aliko Dangote, he's got this refinery underway near Lagos. What's the government's view of that?
Very happy. I've worked as minister. I've worked collaboratively with him. My ministry has worked collaboratively with him. We give him all the support. I'm one of those who believe that the future of any industry in Africa is on the private sector. The government can do all it can, but ultimately the private sector is going to take the lead. So if to the extent you can create policies and incentives that enable a private businessman to get in and make a return on his investment, then you are doing the right thing. If you continue to subsidize the territory, it's going to catch up with you. So we'll give him a lot of encouragement. I'm looking forward to that. I was hoping that our own refineries, the 3 or 3+ one that we have, would have been repaired in time to be fully functional by end of 2019. The negotiations between NNPC and the private sector in terms of helping to bring in private capital in an asset that is 300% controlled by the government hasn't gone as well as it should be, and it certainly hasn't met the terms that NNPC finds acceptable. And
what capacity are those 3 government refineries working at?
Total capacity in Nigeria is about 4, if I'm not mistaken, more like about 450,000 barrels. So one of them is about 100, one is 60, another one is 100. And so there are 3 refineries, one in Kaduna, one in Warrior, one in two largely in Port Harcourt, but all put together about 430, 450,000 barrels. Aliko Dangote is building one of about 650,000 barrels.
What difference will it make?
Oh, a huge amount of difference. I would imagine that once it comes on stream, our importation will nearly disappear. Our consumption isn't 600,000 barrels a day today. It's more in the range of about 400, 500,000 barrels with some efficiency. So if the government refineries get repaired, and if Dangote's refinery comes on stream, you will be moving from a present absorbed capacity of less than 80,000 barrels a day to more like about 1.1, 1.2 million barrels a day, inclusive of a few modular refineries that are also coming up. So that will basically put us in where we should be, which is basically exporting refined petroleum products rather than importing refined petroleum products. So it will make a lot of difference.
So that would be enough for Nigeria's needs completely?
It should be.
Okay. And Dangote himself, how do you find dealing with him as a...
Excellent. He's a very focused businessman, very strong national objectives also, understands what it means to be a businessman in Nigeria, and also what it means to look after the interests of your own country while you're doing business. Strong philanthropist, a very well-run organization. You may not agree with him in everything that he does, but you shouldn't. If you did, then there's some issue. But we've gotten along from the ministry with him very well. We've given him all the support. We've worked with him. He's very consultative. He's very bullish about his business, which is good, like any other good businessman will be. No issues at all.
So the days of Nigeria exporting its own oil and getting it back again from other refineries could soon be over.
I'm hoping it should soon be over. Still some time away.
They're running a bit out of time here, but there's one question I must ask you. The court case against ENI and Shell that I know was launched at the end of last year. How is that progressing?
Progressing well. It's not really a case by the government, but by the Italian authorities. So I know we are watching that, obviously, to the extent that any fraud was committed, which has a financial impact on the government. The government is determined to retrieve back whatever that impact is. So we're watching that very bullishly. And I think it's progressing well. But what we've basically done is we've shown our interest before the Italian courts. The Attorney General has put in a representation, but we are not the originators of the action. We're really side players in the action. But I think it's going on well.
And also, just looking ahead to a new government, just last but not least, any new legislation or regulations that might come in, you think, in the next term?
Well, of course, like you know, the PIB is something that has been done over the last 10 years. This present assembly, which is the 8th assembly, managed to get it passed on both houses. It went to the president. President objected to it on grounds of certain flaws that he saw, some of which were the powers of the minister and the way it was mutilated. That's gone back to the assembly. Very unlikely, but who knows, whether when they return back from post-election at the end of, towards the middle of March, when we finish the gubernatorial elections, whether they will take it up again to try and address some of the concerns of the president and then send it back for assent. But I imagine that if it doesn't go through now, that will certainly be something that we're going to be focusing on, trying to get it finally passed, so that you have a law that is all comprehensive and deals with all the issues that the oil sector has continuously complained about. Right now, what we've tried to do is use regulations where we can, ministerial regulations, to cover some of the gaps that exist in the law, but that's never usually good enough and can be challenged.
Thanks, Chris, and also to the Nigerian Petroleum and Resource Minister, Emmanuel Kachikwu. And that is where we will have to leave it. And also, we look forward to seeing you again on Capital Connection at 6:30 Central African Time every Monday and Wednesday. From us, have a good night.